Well, first I want to deep dive into the different types of data that you can organize in your Keela account, because we need that base, that context, before we can get into the next thing, which is the labels and buckets and fields that you can use to organize your data. So for example, we'll be looking at tags, impact areas, campaigns, all that kind of good stuff. Now, the ultimate goal of this webinar, for me, because I need to have a goal, I need to have a purpose in life, is to convince you that the more labels you have and apply to your data, the more empowered you're going to be, because data is beautiful, data is everything, and it's going to be what empowers you towards the end of the year to make data-driven decisions. And I love that. That is the goal. So keep that in mind when you're listening to everything I'm saying. Of course, I'm going to show you what it looks like live in action. I'll be dispersing that throughout. So we'll have sort of breaks with Keela and then back to the slide deck, and then Q&A at the end, my favorite part. First, story time. Picture this. Keela is a bookshelf, and it already comes with a couple of things on that shelf. For example, this trophy is our online donation form that allows your donors to make donation payments, receive compliant receipts, and have their data automatically added to Keela. So that came with the bookshelf. This photo over here is our lovely customer care team, who are experts in the Keela system. We're there to help you. We can give you advice. We can kind of troubleshoot. That came with Keela. That came with your account. This vase is our email marketing tool. This soccer ball is our smart data analytics. It's a pretty cool bookshelf. I'd be happy with that bookshelf. Well, I wouldn't really. It's not going to win me any prizes on the World's Most Amazing Home TV series, which I am a big fan of. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it after this webinar. But it's still missing that oomph. It's a skeleton without all the muscles. It's too sparse. So what we need now is your books of data. So this beautiful metaphor is designed to show you that without your data in the system, without making specific efforts to keep it up to date, to keep it hygienic and clean, making sure it's all neat and tidy, and getting it into Keela, you're going to have a very empty bookshelf. And if you, on the other spectrum, if you do take the time to put your data into Keela and to make it really valuable by adding these labels, you're going to have the most beautiful and useful storage medium possible, the ultimate wooden bookshelf. Let's break it down. So today's session is about how to organize those books. I've just convinced you that it's important to have books. I don't think I needed to be honest, but I'm always happy to defend books and their place in society. But now I want to talk to you about how we're going to organize those books to make those books meaningful. To be honest, this is where my bookshelf metaphor ends. It's a very high level metaphor, and I think as we get deeper, it just doesn't hold up. But I will break it down into data types. So the first and most important of all your datas is contact data. So why is it so important? Well, think of it as the people data. It's the individuals, it's the companies that are connected to your organization in some way. First and foremost, it's your subscribers. So anyone who's ever said, yes, I do want to receive those emails and that newsletter that you spend so much time on. I want to be there. I want to hear about your organization. So basically the folks that you need to communicate with from Keela. Second, we've got your donors, the folks who have made donation payments, who are allowing you to continue your organization to perform your wonderful cause areas. Those people who you're going to be either importing a bunch of at the start or who are going to be added later on. We've got payees, people who make payments to your organization that aren't necessarily donations. So, people like sponsors, people who perhaps have paid for a grant, for example, that's another revenue person. So payees, your volunteers, just any human, company, organization, pet, human being in the universe that is connected to your organization in some way. If you have them in your organization, if you have them in your bookshelf, if you have them in your Keela account, they can become a pillar and a supporter of your organization. So this is our contact data. That's why it's so important. It's really at the heart of everything that you're doing. We've got donation data. So once you've added your contacts, once you have these beautiful contact profiles sitting in your Keela account, your donation data is going to be added to those contact profiles. So that's why I say this data should come after contact data. You should be putting all your contacts into Keela and then putting the donation data in the profile. And I'll show you what I mean in a second when we jump into Keela. But this is your giving data. This is the donation payments. These are the gifts that are eligible for a donation receipt from individuals, organizations. Revenue data, exactly the same, except completely switched. It is the non-donation payments, the payments that are not eligible for a donation receipt. So things like the sponsorships and the grants that I mentioned. So this is so far 3 types of data that you can put into your Keela account already. And all of them that I'm going to be saying from now on should come after contact data. Volunteer activity data, not to be confused with your volunteers. No, this is the actual records of your volunteering hours that your organization is receiving. So it has a start date, it has an end date. It's showing the actual contribution of your volunteer, not the volunteer themselves. Sometimes folks come to me and they say, I'm looking at the volunteer import, but there's some really weird fields on there and I don't know where to put the address. And I think, aha, you're trying to import a volunteer record, like the record of the contact, rather than the volunteer activity, which is just the day that the start date, the end date, what they were doing, how they contributed to your organization. So differing sets of data, doing different things, all of which have meaning, all of which can be powerful. Membership subscription data. This is a completely new one. We actually released this within the last couple of months. Time has flown and it's a human construct. I'm still getting over September next week. So don't ask me to quote exactly when it was, but it was within the last couple of months. You can now import subscription data. So this is the records of the membership subscriptions themselves. For example, Elsie was a gold level puppy member in the year of 2019. So the start date was January 1st, 2019. The end date was December 31st, 2019. The actual record of that subscription is this. My record, me, would be contact data because it's a person. This is just the actual subscription itself. So you can see why I'm giving you this context. There's a lot of different angles we're looking at right now. Another new one, this one I can quote. This one was this month. Interactions data. This is the data that you can import into your Keela account, or you can add it one by one. All of these you can import or add one by one. And it's the records of the actual interactions between your organization and your contacts. So all that good stuff, the stuff that Keela can't replace, the one-on-one connections, the phone calls, the way that you can sort of track every touch point that you've had. A really important thing about tracking interactions is that they're sort of the secret that you can unlock if you have something really successful happen. So for example, we got a really big donation from someone who no one had spoken to at our organization. No one, I'm like, hey, where did this come from? I look at my fundraising coordinator, they look back at me, they've got no idea where that donation came from. If I go and look at the interactions, I can say, well, oh, they subscribed to our newsletter from our social media post. They opened a couple of different emails that we have about this specific event, and then they donated on this day, and you can track their thought process as they've been connected to your organization. So that's why that data is really important. It's all very important, but it helps you tell a story about your organization that you would be blind towards otherwise. Let's summarize in Keela. So that was a lot of information about all the different types of data. I want to show you how it looks in Keela so that you can sort of put a place to the name, I suppose. So I'm going to jump into my Keela account. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so you can see. And let's look at Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo is my favorite fake profile that I like to show in tests. So this is Scooby-Doo's contact profile. I'm on the profile tab automatically. This is where I get taken when I click on Scooby-Doo. And here is where all of that contact data that I mentioned is going to be put. So this is the information like first name, middle name, last name, email address, anything to do with Scooby-Doo as a person or as a canine, I suppose. Scooby-Doo is a fictional canine, you know, just like all the contacts in your database. All of this information is contact data. So it's giving us information about that person. If I head to the interactions tab, that's the next one along. These are those interaction records I was talking about. So you can see here we've got a couple of direct mails, some email marketing, a phone call. This is the information that I can use to suss out, well, how have we interacted with this contact? How have they responded to those interactions? How can we replicate this? How can we tweak it? What can we make different? What can we continue? Some of these you can add yourselves. You can create them one-on-one. You can import them into Keela. A lot of them are created automatically. If you do something in Keela, we'll create an automatic interaction for you. So for example, email from Keela, email marketing, and if you ever send a direct mail from Keela, they're automatically going to be logged here. So half the work's done for you. Heading to fundraisers, let's look at transactions. We've got revenue transactions, we've got donations. This is where the payment data is going to be stored. So you've imported Scooby-Doo as a contact, and all of this other information is sitting under that profile. So once you sort of understand that contacts are at the top of everything and all the other data is kind of supplementary, you can really get a handle on how you can leverage it yourself. So we've got here donations, we've got revenue payments. I jump into memberships. This is where the membership subscription is held, not the payment. If you've got a fee, that's actually going to be in the transactions tab there. We want to make sure that all of your payments are stored in the same place. So if a membership comes through, that will be stored in here as a revenue because it's a non-donation payment, right? But the actual subscription itself will be stored here. So we keep them separate so that you can filter by membership subscriptions, but still have your fees count towards your transaction reporting. And lastly, here's what I mean about volunteer activities. Not every organization has volunteers, and when they do, not every organization tracks their hours. So sometimes folks don't know this is here. So I wanted to show you what I mean by volunteer activities. I've got someone working at reception at my organization. It's Scooby-Doo. That's where he is for all the answers. For all time, we know Scooby-Doo, where are you? In the reception of my office. I can see the start date here, so I know when this occurred. I can see the hours because we've logged it, and I know the impact area. That's what it was contributing towards. So all of these sections of data that I've just talked about come in to tell a complete story about Scooby-Doo as a contact. They all complement each other. Whew, that's the data. That's what we're not here for. That was the context of everything you need to know to now find a way to organize that data in a really beautiful and magical and wherever possible, automatic way. So, you know, Keela's a bookshelf. It comes with some inbuilt tools and ornaments that look lovely. How do we organize those books? The first set of data I want to talk about, the most important, was that contact data, the people, the heart of everything. How can we organize our people? Firstly, you can filter and sort your contacts by all the data that is stored on their profile, by this information in here. So this includes sort of the pre-existing fields that come with your Keela account. So they're pretty general fields. We saw them before. I'll flick back in just to give you a little peek again. It's this stuff here, the first name, the middle name, the last name, the email address. They're the fields that everybody pretty much has, that we've decided, okay, every organization who uses Keela is probably going to have these fields. Most of them will. That's where we're going to stand. Pre-built fields that come with every account. It also includes other types of data. So you can organize and sort your contacts by that profile information that I just showed you, but you can also sort and organize and filter your contacts by the rest of the data too. I can filter my contacts by the day that their membership subscription started. I can filter them by the time of year that they donated and which campaign it was towards. So start thinking about your contacts and how you're using all of the data that is available on their profiles and in those tabs that I went through to organize them. That's a very general kind of first level. That's how you can organize your contacts. But then there are two other ways here that I want to speak about in a lot more detail. Tags and custom fields, because these look at the ways that you can organize your data specific to your organization. Like I said, all the other stuff, we just took a very, very educated guess at what everybody needs on a profile. But we wanted to make sure that every organization had the flexibility to create their own way of organizing data. So we added tags and custom fields. Tags is the first one. I think tags is probably actually the most commonly used organizational method at Keela for all organizations. It's just something that we all kind of recognize. Tags are in email inboxes, they're on social media, kind of websitey stuff. I think we see tags in a lot of areas of the world, so it comes the most familiar to us. But just in case you're new, I know I've got some new faces on here today, so for your benefit, tags are a single label, just one or a few words that you can apply to a group of contacts who have something in common. So you can pick and choose exactly which contact is added to which tag, and then they can join the rest of the folks who have that label. So all of the people who have that label have that one thing in common. Tags are a really great way to group contacts together under a single umbrella. So it's just one umbrella. They either are this thing or they're not. They either have this tag or they don't. So some examples I've got down here, I see people using a donor tag, a volunteer tag, board member tag, newsletter tag, just really general tags. And when you look at that, you'll see from those examples that it's sort of like a bucket. You put your contacts into it. Contacts can have multiple tags, so they can be in multiple buckets, but the buckets themselves only tell you one thing. Is this contact a donor? Yes or no? That's it. Which is awesome for big groups of people, but if you're wanting to dive a little bit deeper and impart more information, then custom fields is definitely the way to go. Before I move on to custom fields though, I want to show you what tags look like in Keela. If I scroll down, here's tags here. So see, we've got annual gala attendee, donor, board member. I'm very creative with my test account, volunteer applicants, and volunteers. So I can now see anybody who's in that donor tag if I want. I can go and look at that. Custom fields are exactly like your pre-built fields in Keela. They work in pretty much the same way, except you create it. So custom fields allow you to create your own fields on a contact's profile to store whatever information is relevant to your organization, because there's bunches and bunches. The one thing I've learned about the nonprofit industry, I mean, I've learned a million things, but probably the most mind-boggling to me is that every single organization is so completely different that you cannot compare any two nonprofits. Everyone's doing something different, something new, something very special. That's why we need you all. If you're all doing the same thing, we would only need a handful, right? That's the kind of diversity that we need in the world. And so we've given you a diverse way of organizing your data in the form of custom fields. So you can have all different types of custom fields. You can have fields that you create to store a random number. Maybe you have membership numbers that you want to store in there. You can have multiple choice options. You can have just plain old text. You can type anything in there. You can even upload files to custom fields, and they're managed in here. Let me show you. Oh, I'm already here. So we've got my custom fields in here in the organization settings, which you can find just in this menu here. I can come in, I can create sections of custom fields. So I've got all of my volunteer custom fields put in here, and I can add different questions in there. So if I look here, volunteers, if I head back to Scooby's profile, we've got all of these pre-built fields. I can scroll down, and when I get to volunteers, that's when I know my custom field section starts. So this is where, these are all the fields that I added to my Keela account. You can add as many as you want. There's no limitation on that. I hope there never will be, but I'm sure that someone somewhere will try and add 1,000 custom fields to Keela, and I want to see what happens. But that's what I mean by that. We're allowing you to sort of come in here and say, okay, I'm going to edit that. I know that Scooby's available Tuesday AM, done. So the difference between tags and custom fields is a question I get sometimes. I wonder if someone's asked it in the chat now. If it has, haha, I'm reading your mind. Tags, like I said, great way for telling one bit of information. So for example, let's look at this volunteer tag down here. Scooby has that tag. I know Scooby's a volunteer, but that's the only information I can get. If I want to know when Scooby can volunteer, if I want to know if he has A driver's license, probably not. He doesn't have opposable thumbs, but you never know. If I want to see his volunteer application or his written waiver, all that information, that deeper information, that needs to be a custom field in here. So that's what I mean by the ways that you can organize your contact data. You've got your pre-existing fields, the stuff that we've provided for you. You can create tags whenever you like, and you can have custom fields to store anything else that you can think or dream of. Now, time for our first best practice. I'm just going to have a sip of coffee though. Thank you very much. Best practices contact data. So I talked about where that information is being stored. I talked about how you can add it. You saw me update a custom field, but how do we use that in a way that is sustainable, can be updated in bulk, all that kind of good stuff? How can you use Keela to leverage those tools that we've given you? Well, first one. I know that you all spent a bit of time, most likely, getting your data beautifully formatted and imported into Keela, or perhaps you have just starting out, you're adding contacts one by one. No matter how you got your contacts into Keela, if you decide later on that you want to add more information, if you decide after this webinar, hey, Elsie has sold me, custom fields are the best, I'm going to add some. This is how I want you to do it. Let's jump into Keela. I'm going to head to contacts and I'm going to create a segment. Now, if I wanted to, I could always export data because that's what I'm going to be doing. Spoiler alert. I could always export data from here, but I'm always inclined to create a segment just because I can save it. And you never know, I might stuff it up, I might forget something. If I create it as a segment, I can always come back and make that change and not have to do it again. Because data is power and I want to empower myself. Okay, so let's come in here. I'm going to call this segment my contact export segment. I'm just going to use it every time I want to export contacts. I come to here, I can make filters and changes, and if I want, I can update those filters. My first piece of advice during this process, I am exporting my data from the Keela system. Filter your data, filter it here if you can, because the idea that I'm saying, that the whole concept that I'm working with is updating your data via import. So I'm going to be exporting my data from the Keela system. I'm going to update, add some bits and pieces of information to it, and then I'm going to import it back into the Keela system. But I don't want to update 80 records. I don't want to update 1,000 records. I want to make sure that I am only starting off with the data that definitely needs to be updated. So let's say I'm updating the address of a contact. So I'm going to look for, I'm going to filter by country, and I'm going to choose is empty. This is a good tip. Think about the information you're wanting to filter by and then filter it out. So anybody who appears now in my list, their country field in their address is going to be empty. Because I think we can safely assume if someone doesn't have a country, then either their address is incomplete or they don't have one at all. So we'll go ahead and we'll save that. Beautiful. I went from 80 to 10. That's a dream. So now I only have 10 contacts in my list. These are the contacts that I'm going to export from my account, update, re-import, updating their profiles. So from here, I'm going to click on this little export icon. I'm going to zoom in just in case you've never seen it before. It's this little paper download icon here. So we'll go ahead and we'll click it. Time for best practice tip number 2. Create export templates that you use whenever you're doing this process. So what I mean by is when you're exporting data from Keela, you can choose which columns of data you would like to export. If you want, you can just select all of it, but look at that. That's outrageous. I've got all of those custom fields. That's crazy. That's so many fields. Can't be done. I'm just going to close that. That was alarming. Let's go back, and this time I'm just going to pick only the specific fields that I need. Always choose contact ID, and that will become prevalent later on when I explain the next best practice. But for starters, we'll just go with contact ID. I might go first, middle, and last name, just so that I know what I'm working with in my data. Let's go with all of my address fields here. And then that might be it. And I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to call it my contact plus address export. So once I save this, I'll be able to choose that from my export template list. Let's give it a good name. And we'll save it. Okay, view export history, we'll just head straight there. That's where we can download it from. Here we go. Beautiful, and there it is there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and download it. So where are we? We filtered our data so that we're only looking at folks who don't have country addresses. We've exported it, and now I'm going to update it and bring it back into Keela. And this is one of my favorite ways to bulk update tags and custom fields. And let me show you why. Okay, so for some strange reason, there is a blank row at the top of every export in Keela. I have no idea why. I know that it was explained to me, but on the day that it was explained to me, a pigeon had crashed into the window of our 22nd floor office back when we had offices, remember that? And the entire office was frantic. So while someone was explaining to me why this row is here, I wasn't listening. And at this point, I'm too scared to ask. I know it's just something technical. I don't want them to know I can't remember. And I also don't want to make someone relive the horrific pigeon death that we experienced unnecessarily. So just take my word for it. You can just delete it. One day when the wound isn't so raw, I will find that out for you. But for the moment, I just delete it every time I see it. I can't look at it. Reminds me of bad memories. So here I am. I've got my exported spreadsheet. This is straight from Keela. So if you're going to be importing Keela to update contacts, this is what you want to start with, because this spreadsheet is geared. I feel like geared is not a very translatable word as with an Australian accent. It's geared to speak to Keela. So it's going to slip right in there. So if I look at my columns here, you've got a couple of options when you're looking at re-importing this data back to Keela. So I'll come in here and let's say I want to update these countries. Beautiful. I've updated my addresses. Everything's ready to go. When I re-import it back to Keela, there are a couple of ways that I can sort of say, hey, Keela, my spreadsheet has contacts in it that already exist in my account. And I want you to merge those together, like cookies and cream. That's what I'm going for. This is how we tell Keela to use the cookies and cream effect. You can choose to look at first name, middle name, last name, and compare those things. And that's definitely a great option. However, sometimes the first name and last name data that you're working with, there might be slight variations. Because it's just text, there can be room for error, right? You know, sometimes you're working with spaces. If someone has spaces in their last name, or you've got punctuation, or maybe there's a middle name for one person but not for another, there is room for error with that if you're not keeping your data absolutely consistent. So what I tend to do is not worry about it at all, because I made sure that I had this contact ID when I was exporting my data from Keela. That is the dream. That's already getting us halfway there, because this is a unique code that Keela uses to keep track of your contacts. Everyone's going to get a different variation. When you import it back into Keela, Keela's going to check for that code, line them up, and push them together. And it's going to be cookies and cream for days. But wait, Elsie, sure, there's room for error in the first name, middle name, and last name. Everyone has different spellings. I get it. But what about email addresses? Doesn't everyone have a unique email address that only they use, that they don't share with anyone else? Couldn't that be used? Well, in an ideal world where data was beautiful and sacred, no one would share an email address, and it would be a beautiful world for us data nerds. But let's be honest, I know so many people that share email addresses with their partners, with their families, with their cats. It's just not really a viable option all the time. Sure, if you know that your data is perfect and that there's no contacts who share an email address, then you can certainly tell Keela to compare email addresses and match them up that way. Or if you know you've got a couple of contacts who have an email address that matches up, you can remove them from the spreadsheet. You can get rid of them, you can update them manually and get everyone else to merge based on email address. Contact ID, you don't have to do any of that stuff. That's where I sit with it. Now, since I'm in the process of updating my contact data anyway, why not add a tags column and update some tags in here? So maybe I want to update this with 2022 contact audit, because in 2022, I've gone through and I've double checked all of the data on the people who've exported from this list. I've made sure everything's accurate. I'm going to re-import them back into Keela, put a tag on them saying 2022 contact audit. Pro tip, if you're working with dates, you can't click and drag down to make everything the same because Excel will add one number to it. So you have to do the old copy and paste thing. I forget this every time. I've been working with Excel for 10 years, and that is my secret pain. I do that every time. I'm sorry I had to watch that. But now everyone is going to be updated with that 2022 contact tag. I know I've audited them. That's how I keep track of it. Another option could be maybe a custom field. So if you have a custom field in your account that stores information, you can import any kind of bits and pieces that you want. So let's say I have a custom field and it's called address checked. Let me copy and paste that. And maybe I just want to put a Y in there because it's a yes or no field. So when I re-import this data, these two fields are going to be, the tags are going to be created, the existing custom field is going to be updated, and all of that address data that I magically put in is going to be updated as well. Let's take a look at that. Whoop, where are we? So I'm going to be zooming out a little bit. Let's head to imports, and I want to talk you through the concept of organizing this, of getting these contacts updated so that you can organize them. So we'll do a new import. Now, first things first. These little toggles here are how you tell Keela to look for duplicates in your data with existing account. So here's the cookies, here's the cream. Tell Keela how they should identify cookies versus cream. We can search for origin ID, which when coming from Keela is called a contact ID. If it's coming from an external CRM, maybe you're coming from Salesforce. If you are, that's a lot, and I am very sorry for your pain. I've worked with Salesforce in the past. It can be a lot. But if they have origin IDs, so that's how they identify your contacts, and maybe you want to import them. Today, for the purposes of this, we're looking at contact IDs. Now, I went and deleted my first name, middle name, and last name when I was talking to you about how I was going to ignore it. I was only going to use that specific Keela ID. I didn't really need to delete it. In fact, that was actually quite dramatic. I could have just turned these toggles off. So that's what you can do. You can come in here and you can pick and choose. If I turn this on, I can say, hey, Keela, can you look for origin ID first or contact ID first? If you can't find a match, then look for primary email address, because there's actually a hierarchy there as well, which can be really cool. So we'll turn that off. Down here, you've got the options to say, hey, once we find the match, what do we do with the match? You can say, all right, number one, let me choose, which is a lot. If you have 10 contacts, this option's perfect because you can pick and choose which data in the spreadsheet to keep, which data in the profile to keep. You can mix and match. But if you've got 100 contacts, I don't want you to have to go through and pick and choose for 100. That's wild. Unless you've got a volunteer who you're not quite sure what you want to do with them on that day, you might give them that job. Might be a satisfying thing for them to accomplish, but you're all very busy. So I suggest using automatically replace all fields in existing contacts with imported fields. So what that's going to do, it's going to replace my address with anything new. So we're getting basically at this point, just the country is going to be updated. I didn't add anything else, so that's going to remain as it was in the Keela account, which was blank. But if I did put stuff in here, it would have replaced it. It's going to add that new tag, and it's going to update that custom field. It's going to replace those fields. And if there was a no in this field, it would be replaced with a yes. that was updating data via import. And I think the biggest takeaway I want you to have is use contact IDs when you're exporting data, updating it, re-importing it back in. That was data. Let's look at tags now. I love tags because they're beautiful, they're vibrant, they're a single label, they're really simple to explain, and I think everyone gets them. What I do not like about tags is that often they need to be updated manually. Because it's just a random label that you've applied to your contacts, Keela doesn't know why, for what rhyme or reason you applied this tag. So you might need to manage it manually. This next best practice, I want to show you how you can do it automatically. This is how you can organize your contacts with a tag automatically, the ultimate outcome. Let's jump back in here. I want to head to forms, and I'm going to look at my September fundraising form. And it doesn't matter what type of form you're using. You can use a donation form, membership, subscription. You can be using our old original form builder or our new one. No matter what, you're heading to settings. Everything about this is the same across all of our forms. Head to the settings tab, scroll down to auto tag contacts, and put any of your existing tags in here. So let's say my donor tag up at the top. Anyone who fills out my donation form is going to be a donor, so I can rest assured that I want them to be tagged with this donor tag. So anybody from now on who fills in this form, they're going to be tagged with that. If I'm using it as a campaign, I can put that information in here, maybe annual gala 2022 if it's for a specific event, and I think I might want to keep track of these contacts. You can use it to track volunteer applications. So pop this tag on a volunteer application form. Anyone who fills in that application form becomes a volunteer applicant automatically. Your volunteer coordinator, if you have someone who does that, might be a volunteer themselves. They know that they just need to look at those contacts with that tag, and that's happened automatically. Love automation, love data and automation together. It's beautiful. Updating fields with forms. So that was tags. What about fields in general? I don't want to do a spreadsheet. I want my contacts to update their own data for me. The ultimate automation. You can certainly do this in forms. Now, this will be a little different depending on whether you're using our original form builder or our new form builder. I'm going to demonstrate a new form builder today, but I'll be sure to include a video of how to do it in the original form builder in the follow-up email. Head to the designer, head to contact details, add some fields. I'm going to say, hey, I want to know this information about you. I can pick and choose from any of the fields that are on my contacts profiles. I've got a list. I've got all that personal info. This is all the pre-existing stuff that we've got going there. And then I've got all of my custom fields. Remember, my custom fields started with volunteers. This is where my custom fields start. There's heaps of them. I'm going to put subscription opt-in. Everyone should have that on every form. You should always be trying to get people to opt into your emails. And then let's say I have a custom field that I want to add, and it's communication preferences related. What about solicitation preference? That's the one. And I'm going to look at type of content. So this is a custom field that I created that's multi-choice. Folks can come in and tick this when they're filling out the form, and it lets me know, hey, what kind of information are you interested in? Do you want event data? Do you want news data? Let me know. You can control it. So anything that's put through this form, if they answer that question, it's automatically going to be updated on your contacts profiles. So you've got organized data in an automated way. It's fantastic. That was contacts. That was the biggest one. The rest, I'm a very quick, once you've wrapped your head around the concept of contacts, donations, revenue data, volunteer data, it's going to come with great ease. So the best thing about this, the best thing about whether it's a donation payment, a revenue payment, or a volunteer interaction, a volunteer activity, there's only 3 labels, and it's the same for all of them. So learning this one page, you're going to learn 3 sets of ways to organize 3 sets of data. What are the labels? There are 3 labels. The first is the source. The source label, not very commonly used, if I'm being honest. It's used to describe where the funds or the volunteer activity came from. So where did they come from? Not many people track this because sometimes it just doesn't make sense. It's like, well, they came from the universe. What more do you want me to say? But there are some examples here. Perhaps you want to track that it was from from Facebook giving. That might be good if you're not running a specific campaign. You could use the source and say, this came from Facebook. Donation matching can be a good one. And for volunteers, if you're tracking the source of a volunteer activity, you could say, this person saw a flyer, this person was referred by a friend. And the ultimate goal is for you to look at the end of the year and say, these were all of our payments, donation and revenue. These are our volunteer activities. Where did they come from? What is our most profitable source of time, people's time when they're giving it, of people's funds? And you can track it back that way. In my experience, most nonprofits know this intimately and they don't need a report to tell them. It's all stored in their brain. They are eating, sleeping, breathing that information. But if you find that you have hundreds and hundreds of different areas where things are coming from, this can be a great way to track it. Impact area. This is one that everyone can relate to, I think. These are the specific cause areas that your donations or volunteer activities can contribute to. So it's the stuff that you're doing all the time, the things that you run throughout the year, the everyday stuff, the stuff that contributes to your cause area. It's not the big flashy end of year campaigns or anything like that. It's sort of consistent. So some examples of financial impact areas or school lunch programs, people can contribute money towards those when they're giving to you online. Workshops, working bees, someone might contribute their time to a working bee or organizing clothes or doing a food drive or something along those lines. So it's your way of keeping track of where the funds or the time was contributed to. Source is where did it come from? Impact areas is where is it going? Last but not least, campaigns, the flashiest of them all. So campaigns are a type of event or fundraiser that you hold maybe once a year, a couple of times a year. It's not the stuff you're doing all the time. It's the big, big flashy events that you hold or the big kind of pushes that you do. So for example, Giving Tuesday and End of Year are the most famous of all the campaigns that ever did campaign. I think everyone's familiar with those and they're right around the corner, apparently. September, terrifying. Volunteer campaigns are things like your annual gala, of course, but setting up the annual gala. Maybe I volunteered a couple of hours to set up the annual gala. Maybe I cooked a potluck for the Christmas cookout, something along those lines. That's a volunteer activity that goes towards a specific campaign. So these are the three labels for donations, for revenues, and for volunteer data. You learn these, you're good. Let's look at my favorite, updating with forms, and let's look at impact areas specifically. So I'm back on my form here, this beautiful new donation form. Let me go back and I'll zoom out a little bit just so you can see. Okay, now I'm going to click on donate because this is where we're going to be organizing impact areas. This is what we're going to be using the form to apply these labels automatically. So let me jump in here and I'm going to delete these existing impact areas because when I was running through this webinar, I was practicing and I forgot to remove them. And we'll head up here. So there's two options when it comes to impact areas. You have the option of making it really simple on a form, and you've got the option of making it really detailed. Let's say this is my online website form. People come here and just donate very generally, and I'm wanting to add impact areas to it because I want my donors to feel like they have a little bit of control, a little bit of agency around where their funds are going. So because it's my website donation form, I'm going to keep it really simple. Let's go with simple. I'll come down here to impact areas, and this is where I can add those so people can pick and choose where they want their money to go, and it's automatically going to be applied so that I can see all of my impact areas with all of my donations later on, and I won't have to do a thing. The form's going to do it for me. I'll go ahead and I'll add an impact area. The first one I'm always going to add is some variation of the phrase where it's needed most. If you're ever adding impact areas to your forms, add this one first. And that's because It's going to be the first one that appears in the drop-down list. And if your donors are zooming through the form, or if they don't care where their funds go, they trust you, this is a good option to have as the default. And we'll just add one more because I want you to see the variety. Let's add youth workshops. So if I was filling in this form, I'd get to donate to, I'd get this little drop-down list, and I can choose from your ongoing cause areas. Now, some folks say, what if I've got multiple campaigns going on? And I say, if you've got multiple campaigns going on a regular basis, they might not necessarily be campaigns. They might actually be impact areas. But you can have both. We'll get to that in a moment. So like I said, any donation from now on that's made through this impact area will have an impact area automatically applied to it, or at the very least will have where it's needed most. You're done. Your impact areas are automated. You probably never have to do them again. Put them on your forms, let the forms do it for you. Now, I touched briefly on campaigns and impact areas. That's where we're headed next. Updating your forms with campaigns. So adding a campaign to a form has two benefits. Any donation that's made through that form, once a campaign has been connected to it, any donation made through this form is going to have that campaign label applied to it. Beautiful. But there's another reason too. Let me show you. I'm going to head back to overview, and I'm going to edit this and show you that this is where you can add campaigns to your form here. So I've got my end of year campaign added here. So that any donation made through the form, it's going to be applied to end of year, automatically labeled. Perfect. My data's organized, didn't have to do a thing. But also, I have this option here of displaying my campaign progress bar. So I'm just going to remove that and then turn it back on so that you can see the change. This can be a really cool tool, especially now, especially at the end of the year. I think that sometimes folks really don't appreciate how slight changes to your donation forms can have such a heavy impact on your return on investment. Having a campaign progress bar has been proven in the industry to increase the average gift size of your donations. The closer it gets as well. The closer you get to the end, the higher your average gift size is going to become. Because I see this, and if I see it's close, I'm absolutely going to take it to the end. That's just psychology. You know what I mean? So you're getting a 2-for-1 there. You're getting the fact that the campaign is connected to the form, therefore the donation is going to have that label. And also you've got the benefit of increasing average gift size, which I'm always about. Updating labels in bulk. This is the last one, folks. So it's brilliant that we've got all of these ways to have forms update impact areas and campaigns. I love that. But what happens if you forget? What happens if you added heaps of donations before you saw this webinar and you're thinking, Elsie, what do I do? Am I condemned to a lifetime without donation data labels? And the answer is no. If all else fails, here is a surefire way to get your data updated. People make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. We're here for it. We've got a backup plan. If I go to my fundraising and I head to transactions, from here I can select transactions and update their labels in bulk. This might even be easier. You might just prefer to do this. I know some people like to have a lot of control over their data. So I can come in here, Leonardo da Vinci, Scooby-Doo, Betty Boop. I know that all of their donations came through my fictional characters who are probably not relevant to society anymore campaign. So I'm going to click on actions, I'm going to edit associations, and I can change the campaign, the impact area, and the source from here, all in bulk. You don't have to multiple select. If you want, you can select all pages. You can deselect all. You can select just this page. You can filter and then select only those donations that are left. You've got that ability. Now, I just want to point something out. There's this little word here that says keywords, and it is a label that can be applied to a donation, but it is the absolute last type of label if you can't fit your donations into a campaign, an impact area, or a source. It's just a tag that you apply to your donations. And there's so many possible use cases for it. I need an entire webinar to discuss it. So it's not getting talked about today. I'll make sure that I include an article about it in my follow-up email. Okay, that was a lot more talking than I was expecting. I should have known data always brings out the chattiness in me, but we still have some time left for questions. Does anybody have anything for me? I'm going to look in the Q&A box now. Oh, I do. I've got some questions. First one's from Gillian Piper. If someone is a recurring monthly donor, would it be worth it to set them up in Keela as a subscription or membership? What are the benefits? If they're a recurring monthly donor, I would keep them as a recurring monthly donor, because memberships, they're revenue payments. Because traditionally memberships, if you have a membership, you're getting something in return. So for example, let's say I have a pool membership at the local nonprofit pool, swimming pool. That I wouldn't be able to claim that membership or that recurring payment back on my taxes. I wouldn't be eligible because I'm getting a benefit in return. So that's why we have membership fees as being revenue payments. So I think recurring monthly donors, I would just keep them as recurring monthly donors, because that way they're getting those compliant receipts. Because the benefits really, it doesn't matter. It's all a way that you store your data. And as long as you're comfy with it, as long as the data is being stored in some form, you're going to have that empowerment. You're still going to get that effect. And what really matters is how you thank them at the end of the year. So I still think that the members who are subscribed should get an equally fantastic thank you as the recurring donors. You might actually combine that. That's where it actually might have an impact or have a difference. The rest is just semantics and up to you, but I definitely think keep them as recurring donors so that you can get that compliant receipt produced for them. Oh, next one, Shannon McCormick. In our case, we sometimes run registration for short-term classes where there is a fee involved. Would you advise the same thing, membership versus subscription? Depends. It depends how long the course is happening for and if it's consistent. If it's monthly, absolutely a membership would cover that, specifically if they're not going to be getting any kind of donation receipt in return. I think that would be a good one, because then you can sort of keep track of it. The thing with memberships, though, is they unlock a whole different kind of world of automatically renewing subscriptions and things like that. So what I would recommend, if you're thinking of making a switch to a membership subscription, is planning it out before you create anything. Plan it out, go and have a look at what happens when you create memberships, look at all the different fields, and kind of write down what you're thinking and then send it through to us and we can review it. We can say, this is a bit funny because you've got it automatically renewing, but it's monthly. So are you going to send out a renewal every month? Is that okay? If that's okay, then that's brilliant. But sometimes you might want it automatically. So I say that if you are thinking of making the switch, and in Shannon's case, that actually sounds like it could be a viable solution. If it's a consistent workshop that's being run, reach out to us. We can talk you through it. Heather Vince, how do I create a contact record for donor couples who give together but have different surnames? Is there a best practice to enter names as there isn't presently a second surname field? Absolutely. There are a couple of different ways that you can do this, and it really depends on how you intend to communicate with them via email, basically. So if I'll show you how I would approach this. If I go into contacts, and let's say I'm just going to create one. So there's two ways. When you're sending out an email from Keela, you have the choice of using smart codes. And smart codes are kind of placeholders. They're sometimes called merge tags in other email systems, but it's basically a placeholder that you put in your email that pulls information from a contact profile and updates it and replaces it with that information so that you can send a personalized email, but it can be a mass email still. There are different fields that you can pull. And as long as you make a decision about what you're going to be pulling at the start and then go from there and make sure that you stick to it consistently, then you can kind of you can choose your own adventure. Here's what I mean. Let's say we've got Mickey and Minnie Mouse. This is the traditional one, the one where they have the surnames. This is going to work for first name. It's going to pull Mickey and Minnie. For last name, the last name is going to be appropriate when you're producing receipts. For the moment, this is going to work beautifully for a first name and last name smart code for an email. But when it comes to receipts, if I've got mouse and mice as the two different surnames here, that's going to look pretty funny on a receipt, right? So what you can do is put Mickey, mouse, and Minnie Mouse, Minnie Mice, two different surnames, and commit to always using the preferred name field when addressing using that smart code. So this is going to ensure that when anyone's reading this in your contacts, they're going to see Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mice. That's going to automatically make sense to anybody who's reading it. It's going to look beautiful on a receipt. But when you use the smart code, you just need to make sure that you have preferred name here, Mickey and Minnie. Because you don't need last names in an email, right? But it will mean that you'll need to use preferred name for your emails, and everyone's going to have a preferred name updated then. So it's sort of a commitment. You need to make a decision about how you want to organize your data. All of these best practices will work, but it's something that you'll need to kind of continue to manage and keep in your brain. I think the easiest way that I would do it, if it was me, is that I would have a tag on these couple contacts and send them a separate email. So I would put a little tag in here and we'd call it maybe couple, save it. And anytime I sent out my first email, I would do batch number 1 and I would make sure it's going to everyone who doesn't have that tag. So I could just use the first name smart code. And then for anybody else who's a couple, I'd send out just duplicate the email, change the smart code to be for preferred name. And then that way you're going to be sending it out to Mickey and Minnie. So you're not going to need to worry about managing it so stringently for having the same process for couples and non-couples. That's my advice. Oh, we've got a couple more questions. I'm here. I'm happy to stay on if everyone else is. So if you need to jump. Otherwise, I'm going to be here answering questions. Alison, great, thanks. Another question, which may be a different webinar. I'm always here for ideas. Events. I want to make sure we code people who register for events. Ideally, they register on the form, but perhaps they don't. Should we use campaigns to code events, or can you create a custom field that is just called events and add each event as they occur? If you can even do that. Absolutely, you can. You can do both. You could have a campaign. I certainly think you should have a campaign for every event that you have, so that anyone who RSVPs is connected to the campaign, anyone who donates is connected to the campaign. But then most definitely, I recommend having a custom field that stores all of those events. Wondering if I have one that I can show you. Let me take a look. Go to John McLean, beloved NYPD police officer. And let's look for annual gala information. So this is an example of one that we've had where we've got annual gala 2019 RSVP no, but in 2020 RSVP yes. So that's a way of tracking, who's saying yes but not attending, who RSVP'd yet no, but they've come to a past one, all that kind of stuff. So definitely yes, a custom field would be perfect to organize event data, but campaigns you can't lose. You can't lose with both, but that's how I would do that. Tobin Eckstein. I have a lot of questions to add. Here's the first. We have a monthly newsletter, but we also have a specific program email list. Our segments and tags work well for choosing the groups to email, but what is the best way to ask for their email preference? For example, we would like to ask which list they'd like to subscribe to, but in order to do that, it seems that we may need to just do a custom field, yes, that asks yes or no for each email list to add to forms, then filter these contacts. Is that right? You're so close. Absolutely yes. Definitely store that information in a custom field, but I don't think you need one for every single list. What I would suggest instead is solicitation preference. We have one in here. I've got type of content. I've got a custom field with multiple options, because you can have a custom field that you say, these are the possible choices that this person can choose from. And you can say they can only choose one, or they can choose as many as they like. And someone can come in here and they can tick these options, or if you send out a custom form, the contact can go through and tick them themselves. And you can even say, do not send this type of content. I don't want to receive fundraising information at all, and let them control that. And then all of these custom fields, all of those bits and pieces of data, you can create email lists for. So for example, I would have a email list, and it would include people who have type of content equals events true. So anybody who's got this ticked, and do not send this content, events equals false, doesn't have that. And that would be my events list that I would continuously send to. So absolutely store that in a custom field. And then I do have a webinar. I can't remember which one it was. I've done about 20, but there is a webinar that I have where I talk through how to send out an email that asks for people to confirm their subscription status and provide you with this information. I'll find it and I'll pop it in the follow-up email as well, so that everybody has that. Thanks, Tobin. Okay, next question. Oh, Belinda looks like has a few questions, but she's going to be covered. She's going to reach out to Nicole, so that's all brilliant. I think we might be at the end of our questions then. Thanks everyone for sticking with me. Sorry we went 4 minutes over, but I hope that the questions and the pigeon story that I included made it all worth it. This is one of my favorite webinars that I've actually ever done. I'm really passionate about this stuff, and I hope that you're all a bit jazzed as well. Have a wonderful day. Look out for my newsletter next Thursday. I'll announce the next webinar. Always want ideas, always want feedback, always just want to connect with you all. So my pleasure. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Stay safe.